Hello and welcome to My Career So Far. I'm Josh.
I'm Kira. Welcome back to our podcast, and this is our second episode somehow.
I said in the first episode we wouldn't get a second episode, but we've got one. So thank you for listening and thank you for supporting it. It's been amazing. Who have we got on today?
I can't believe I'm about to say these words. Stephanie Hirst.
The woman that I don't think she requires an introduction, to be honest.
No, she is one of my favourite people alive. That's all I'm going to say. That's all you need to know.
I think the interview speaks for itself. A wide career across the radio industry. So should we get into it?
I think we should.
This is the time that we spoke to Steph Hirst.
My Career So Far.
Stephanie Hirst, hello.
Hello there, how are you?
Lovely. How are you?
I am, do you know what? All is good. I've had a crazy busy day, but I've been dead looking forward to this. So I've made myself a brew. I've put the cat downstairs because I've got a cat called Kenny who's very vocal, much like its mother, to be honest. And yeah, he just wants attention and he wants to talk all the time.
I understand it. I understand them.
He's, I'll walk into a room and he'll be sitting there. He'll just look up at me in a kind of really cool way and go, it's like he's saying hello. Or he'll walk into a room and I'll just go, "You all right, Ken?" So yeah, me and Ken got on really well because he's my best mate, essentially.
Lovely. Well, I'm glad you're looking forward to it because we have been looking
Yes.
forward to this for quite a while.
Yeah.
Oh, bless you.
I can actually believe you said yes, Steph, to be honest.
Why?
I don't know. I think we've both been fans of you for a long time.
Oh, that's really sweet. Well, do you know what? Look, we all start out in this crazy radio business, and I'm just a big believer in it. And because whoever it is, if anybody wants an interview or anything, I mean, I'm just honoured that anybody wants to talk to me, to be honest. But do you know what? I always think that when I was first starting out and I wanted to get interviews with people, I just remember it being a little bit tricky. It was quite difficult to get to people because the radio DJs back in the day, they were almost, you had to get through layers of other people to get to them. So if I rang my local radio station, I would have to get through to a phone operative, someone who answered the phones. And it's like when you ring your doctor's surgery and you get through to the reception and you can't get an appointment or for whatever reason, and they won't let you see the doctor until you've told them this or whatever. There's this kind of barrier. I always remember saying to myself, if anybody wants to interview me when I'm older, of course. Yeah, of course. And if I can help anyone in this crazy world of radio, I absolutely will. If I can help kick doors down, I will do. We've got a radio industry that is sizable and huge and large and in a really good place, but also quite shrinking as well in some respects. So the more opportunities I can give to people and kick doors open, well, that's surely a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And we're very grateful that you've given us your time to come to speak to us on our podcast. So thank you very much.
All I say is that when you're running this business in years to come, give me a job. I'm joking.
We'll keep something in mind for you.
Thanks.
I'm sure.
There's just something in mind. Just an overnight show between 4 and 6 in the morning. I'll just say hello to truckers and that kind of stuff. Big hello to all you truckers that are listening. Just anything, just so I can keep the cat in Dreamies. I've got whichever cat that may be, because I don't think Kenny will still be here in years to come.
Really?
Other cat food providers are available.
Yeah, which other moggy that I've got, I need to keep it in Dreamies. So yeah, just need to still keep working.
Well, you have had a lovely career, I'd like to say. And it started off quite early, aged 7, I hear. How did your passion for radio start?
In fact, I'm looking at it on the windowsill now. There it is, my first radio I got when I was 7 years old. I was asked, do I want a brother, sister, cat or a dog? To which, because I'm an only child, and I was quite savvy, thinking, well, if I get a brother or sister, I'll have to share presents. I want to do that. No, I'm joking you. I asked for a dog, so I got a dog. And also, along with the dog, I got a radio cassette. You know those like 80s ghetto blasters?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of those, essentially. And I'm looking at it. It's there in front of me on my windowsill in my office. And I just remember tuning around the dial, because I've said this before in previous interviews. I think when you get your first radio, it's like one of your first freedoms. Do you remember when you got your first bike when you were a kid and you could go to the end of your street and then you got a bit brave and you went a few streets ahead and got a bit scared going, I might get lost, I'm going to come home now. But that's one of your first freedoms. You're allowed out because you've been under, the parental guise of your parents for so long. Whereas, you get your first radio and you can tune around the dial as we did back in the day before DAB came along and digital. You could tune around the dial and then you could make musical choices of your own. You weren't forced to listen to dad rock and all that kind of stuff that my dad was listening to, which is, I quite like it now as I'm older. But
No disrespect.
Yeah, no disrespect to Dire Straits. But but I could tune around the dial and I found dance music. I found all sorts of stuff. And I think for me, that was a real awakening. And I started to hear DJs on my local radio station. And I was like, wow. So I used to ring up to try and speak to the DJs and I couldn't quite get through to them because there was a layer of the phone operative, the person that was answering the phones, and the DJ. But one particular day, one of the DJs, a guy called Paul Stead, who went on to create huge TV shows like the Yorkshire Vet and all sorts of stuff like that, he was on the air and he picked the phone up and I got chatting to him and I said, could I come in? Little did he know I'd already been in. I went in when I was 9 years old on a Radio Air station tour. Because it was their birthday. They had a gala and a fun fair outside and it was 25p to go into the studio or something like that. So I queued whilst my parents sat outside in the sunshine, queued for about 400 years and went in and decided at 9 years old that I'm going to work here. But how do you get to work there? Well, you constantly keep kicking the door and calling up. In fact, I got banned from ringing the radio station so much, not by my parents, by the actual radio station, going, stop ringing. You've got every sticker, you've got every DJ photo card, you've got every T-shirt. What more can you want?
Blacklisted.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Can I have a job? So Paul let me come in one Sunday afternoon on a show that he did called Lazy Sunday Afternoon. And I remember going in, and then I got to go in every few weeks. Then I didn't go in for a bit. And then a position came up where I could go in on a Sunday morning and answer the phones and generally make tea. So I'm really good at making tea because I've made thousands of cups of tea for DJs. So yeah, I was in then. So I used to go in every week, every Sunday morning. Paul didn't live too far away from me and he was doing the Sunday breakfast show. So he'd come and pick me up and take me in. And then we'd have fish and chips that way home or something like that. And then I'd have to wait another week until I could go into the radio station. But that was proper excitement about, oh gosh, I'm in my local radio station. And famous people had come in and stuff like that. And, I'd tell friends about this at school the next day. And they thought I was just showing off, so they punched me.
Oh, sounds painful.
It's bullying, isn't it? So, because you're a kid and you're kind of going, I met, I don't know, I'm trying to think who I met. Rick Astley came in.
Oh.
And I remember saying, Rick Astley came in and da-da-da, and they think you're lying, so they punch you. Because I was I'm from a northern council estate in Barnsley. Yeah, so, and it was an all right school, but I think bullying wasn't taken as seriously as it is now. And yeah, you just got punched. I met Rick Astley. Smack. But I remember meeting Rick Astley. I don't think I've really spoken about this before. He just came in for an interview and I didn't speak to him. I was just, he was there. And I was kind of there and I was, I didn't really get to chat to him, but he was there in front of me. So technically met him. But he'd come in for an interview. So, you kind of got, at that age, I'm 12, 13, 14, you got close to pop stars a little bit because you were in the radio station and they'd come in for an interview. So getting in at a really young age, and it all kind of started with that radio that I'm looking at in my office now, which is, that's the one thing that got me started, I guess, really, just falling in love with this crazy thing called radio.
Yeah, I was going to ask, apparently you've got a radio bedroom that's got full of anorak stuff.
I do have. I am currently sitting in radio bedroom.
Radio bedroom.
Radio bedroom. I've always had some form of studio or something at home from being a kid. So my dad was in bands. He used to play guitar and was a singer. So we'd always have surplus bits of equipment and microphones and tape machines and bits and pieces, much to my mum's disgust, because my mum ran a really tidy house. She was very house proud, my mum. And but my dad was a hoarder. which I think I've managed to pick that trait up a little bit. The amount of times he threw me in skips as a kid, go on, fish that out for us, go on. He'd literally drive past a skip, driving down the road and pass a skip, and we'd pull over and he'd be like looking in it for treasure. So one man's, what did my dad used to say? One man's junk is another man's treasure. So yeah, he'd chuck me as a kid in this skip, go and fish that out. So I'm like, Dad, stop it. So yeah, so we'd always have bits of surplus equipment around the house. So, and I remember seeing, there was a program on BBC Two called Deaf 2, DEF and the letter I twice, Deaf 2. And that was a program that was on BBC, and it was a youth program, and they covered the Technics, as in Technics the brand, who make equipment and turntables, the Technics DMC DJ Championships, and they covered this, and they showed a DJ with 2 turntables mixing, and if you won the Technics DJ Championship, you won a gold-plated Technics SL1200 turntable, to which I think it was Cutmaster Jam or maybe someone like that. I remember him winning it and holding this gold turntable up in the air. And I remember going, I want a pair of double turntables, and we couldn't afford those. Those came much later. I got a pair of Technics, but my dad got me a pair of disco turntables that DJs have in a box, 2 turntables together, and that was I was starting to kind of collect bits of equipment. So I'd set Radio Bedroom up Mark 1 at the age of probably 10 or something, and that ghetto blaster I could record into that. So I was making tapes. My own little tapes in my little bedroom stroke studio. So I was always practicing, and then just along the way, I just picked up other bits of equipment. Then, when I started my own mobile disco at 12, 13. So I'm making a bit of cash from doing discos, and all the money I made from doing discos, I just bought records with or saved up for other bits of equipment. Or at Christmas, I'd get something. I'd get a little mixer, or birthday, because my birthday's in July. So I have to, 6 months, 7 months either side, I had to kind of, wait for the next piece of equipment that I'd requested. So I remember getting a CD player, then I wanted a mixer, then there used to be a thing called like Facebook Marketplace?
Yeah.
There's a thing called, I don't know if it still exists, Exchange and Mart, where basically just people flog stuff, and it was a weekly paper, like free ads. And someone was flogging a proper professional reel-to-reel machine. So my dad bought me that for like 40 quid, which I've just fished out of storage actually, and it's on display downstairs in my house. So because I think it looks quite retro and quite cool. So I could edit on physical tapes. So now if we're making a piece of production, we digitally edit. And whether you use, I don't know, there's Adobe Audition, or there's so many different editing platforms you can edit on these days. But we used to physically edit on tape. So we would get 1/4-inch tape, and if you made a mistake in a piece of, if we were doing an interview or something, you needed to cut something out, you would find the place on the tape on the actual record head that recorded the sound onto the tape, and you'd mark that with a chinograph, and then you'd find the next part where you wanted to cut to, you'd mark that with a chinograph on the head, pull the tape out of the actual mechanism and put that on what we called an edit block, and then you got different angles, 45-degree angles, or a different shape of the angle meant it a smoother edit. And you'd physically cut the tape, and then you'd pull the tape out to find the other bit that you'd marked, put that in the edit block, cut it. All these tutorials, by the way, are on YouTube. Not by myself, but loads of other people have done them, so that you can see it, people editing.
I mean, there's a market to tap into there, surely.
Yeah, I suppose there is actually, yeah. But I don't think many people edit on tape anymore. But lots of bands are recording on tape, because we're recording today digitally, and that is just made up of noughts and ones, isn't it? Whereas sound is different when it's on tape. There's a warmer sound to recording physically onto a piece of tape, onto oxide. So I learned to edit at home, and I could make stuff and take it into Radio Air, or make stuff at Radio Air and bring it home and still play it. So that was really good. So I'd got this little studio, which then allowed me to kind of, I guess, create at home. I'd got my little studio. And then my radio heroes, much later on, I discovered that they also had studios at home, and they'd set little things up. A guy called Kenny Everett, who should never be forgotten. Kenny Everett was a TV star in the 1980s, but in the 1960s and 70s, he was a radio DJ. He was and he broke the radio mold. Steve Wright, the late Steve Wright, they did a special Steve Wright show in memory of Steve recently on Radio 2 over a bank holiday, and there was a show where Steve was talking about Kenny Everett, and he described him as the Salvador Dali of radio. The guy was an absolute genius, and he had a studio at home all the way through his career. He was always making stuff at home, and when he was a young schoolboy, he got a tape recorder, a physical reel-to-reel tape recorder in the early 1960s. I think he got it for a birthday present or something, and then got a paper round, saved up, and bought another one which was exactly the same. So he could record his voice on one machine whilst playing that back into the other machine and adding another voice. So he was multi-tracking in the early 60s.
Magical.
And then he made this show because Kenny's real name was called Morris Cole, and his birth name, which wasn't the most, sexy name as a radio DJ. Hi, it's the Morris Cole Show. Kenny Everett sounded more, zany and wacky. But Kenny made this show called the Morris Cole Quarter of an Hour Show, and he sent it to the BBC in 1964. And they actually broadcast it, this 15-minute show. And he asked if they got any jobs going, because he was like 16 or something. And they said, no, we're full up. But try one of these pirate radio stations that had just launched in the middle of the North Sea, playing 24 hours a day pop music like Radio Caroline and stuff. And he sent it to Radio London, which was one of the big pirate radio stations. And he said he was on the next day. So they gave him a job, and that's how Kenny's career started. So all of us along the way have got little studios. And I guess we've all got a studio now because we've got a laptop. And whether it's GarageBand or whether it's Cubase, whatever you produce, whether you're producing music or radio or whatever, or you're recording music, the power that we can do it on our phones these days. So it gives us this incredible arena to just be able to create. And that's like the best thing in the world. So you don't need all singing and dancing studios. You just need a laptop and some decent software, don't you?
Yeah, I do honestly think it's quite mad how the radio industry has changed from like tapes and stuff like that to
being all fully digital.
Yeah,
I do miss, in some respect, I love the digital world because I just love the future, and I'm fascinated by technology and where we're going next. I was watching something today about they're now doing TVs that are transparent.
Oh.
So LG have created this TV which basically you put it on a stand, but you can see the wallpaper that's behind it. And when you turn it on, it kind of flicks into full 4K or 8K TV. It's crazy. It's crazy. So I'm fascinated by technology.
I dread to think how much that costs.
I know, but in 10 years' time, you'll be able to buy one from Asda. And then it'll break and you just go buy another one. Disposable, innit? So, but I do miss the physicality of old school studios because as a DJ, whether you were playing, I didn't play that much vinyl on the air. There was the odd song that we didn't have on CD. When I got onto the air in the early 90s, there was the odd song that wasn't available on CD, but pretty much all the big stuff was available. So I was when I got in as a presenter, when I was on the air doing shows myself, I was using CDs. But you physically loaded the CD into the machine. You had to go get it from the record library or the CD library that was actually... We didn't keep them in a library. They were just on the wall in the studio a lot of the time. So you'd go and you'd look at your music log and you'd go and grab. In fact, do you know what? Behind me, I've got some of the old ones. Bear away.
Oh.
So if I go and grab, I'll just set here. Oh, here they are. So if I grab, this was CDPO, stands for playlist. This is from Hallam FM in the 90s.
Wow.
And it was... The CD players we used to use were by Denon. And if you want to Google Denon, it's DENON, and the model number is DN-951FA. And you'll be able to see the CD player. So it was a cart system because when us DJs were touching CDs all the time, they would start to stick. So Denon created this system where it was in a case, and then at the back had a slidey bit. So when you put it in the machine, it slid open the flap at the back and read the CD, so you weren't touching the CD. So if I put CD PO72 in one of these machines, which I've got here, in fact,
I love the noises it's making. It's
It's all the noises, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
so clicky.
All,
Love it.
all the noises in the machine. So if I slide it into the machine and then open the fader, and then that should play Nasty Imbruglia. So, but I could then cue the front off. So if I wanted that little, I want to get rid of that. So I could cue that. There you go. So it starts quicker. And then there's a button that says End Mon. So that End Mon is End Monitor. It'll play me the last 9 seconds of the song. So I can work out whether it fades, if it's a brand new song, if I've not played it before. It'll play me the last 9 seconds, whether it fades or it ends. If I press End Mon.
It's Seg editing before we had Seg editing, essentially.
Essentially, yeah. So there's another one I've got, which is Robbie Williams and Strong, which is PO11, playlist number 11. So they would change, obviously the playlist would change all the time. So playlist number 11 would end up being something else at some point. They just take the CD out. But so if I want to take that guitar off the front, frame by frame, there's a little search button. And there you go. And then just press start. And then press end monitor or whatever. Oh, it fades. There you go. So there was more physicality when you were a radio DJ back in the 90s because you were physically doing stuff. Now it's all in a computer system, whether that's Myriad, Zeta, Dira, whatever. There's lots of different play out, or play out one or something like that. There's lots of different play out systems, but it's taken away the physicality. The technology is incredible, what we can do with splits and all sorts of stuff. But I physically miss doing something with my hands. You know, when you're doing a segue, I was physically pressing the buttons myself and smashing a jingle in and then firing the song, you know, flying the fader open and working the desk, flying it like a pilot would fly a plane. Whereas these days, it's all done in a computer system. And that's one thing I kind of do miss. And the noises.
Oh. I suppose there's more of an art to it if it's physical media as opposed to it all being digital. Yeah.
Or if you really got annoyed and you'd done something, you know, you'd cocked a link up, it gave you something to throw.
Just chuck it into the bin.
You could pull a CD out of the machine. Oh, this was another thing that used to happen. This was classic me, this. I stick Robbie Williams back in the CD player. So I do something on the air. So these CD players, you can physically, if Google the name of it, as I said, Denon DN951FA.
Yeah, got a photo up
and
here.
And you can flip up the actual CD. You literally, and you lift it and take it out. So there's no physical button to press eject. You just flip it up with your fingers. So what I would do, because I'm an idiot, I'd start the song, go blah 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 blah. I was on Hallam at the time, so it says his big drive home, Hallam FM, da 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 da, blah blah. Anyway, start singing. Robbie starts singing. There you go. Song's playing, and someone would come in the studio and distract me. I'll go, oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, do you want a coffee? Yeah. And I'd turn to the CD player, and then literally eject the one that was playing.
Oh, dead air.
And I'd just look at the CD player and look at the level meters and go, brilliant. And because I don't panic, I just literally shut the CD back in the CD player, open the mic and go, I've ejected the CD again. I probably did it 3 times in my career. But it's, you know, one too many times. Because people would distract you and it was so easy to eject them. It was rare that we did it. You know, I might have done it 3 times in my entire CD playing career. But when you did, your backside fell out. And you just knew you were going to get a bollocking from the boss. You just knew it. But someone would come in and distract you and you'd eject the wrong CD. So I learned then to really just look and... Because that's the thing with physical media. You had to really pay attention to what you were doing. Because otherwise you could just eject stuff. Or stop things.
Wow. I think my mind has been slightly blown.
It's like being in a radio time machine, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm geeky, but that is like a new level.
Oh, yeah, proper geeky.
Wow. Oh, my God.
Gosh, I know. So I do miss that kind of radio, but I also love what we've got now and the splits that we can do and all sorts of bits and pieces. I love the way things are now, but because I experienced how it was in the 90s and noughties, there's a little, it was quite nice to physically touch things back in the day. Because we're human, aren't we? From birth, we're given activity things to do, whether it's little blocks with numbers and letters on, all these kind of things. So it's tangibility, isn't it? We're taught from birth to be able to pick things up. It's one of the skills of life, isn't it? Holding something and having your grip. So I kind of miss that in radio a little bit. But I love physically driving the desk. And I urge anybody who's listening to this who's interested in radio, learn how to use this piece of equipment that's in front of you. Break it. Not break it as in get the engineers out and get telling off, but, find out what takes it off air. Find out what, so you don't do it again. Learn what it does. They're quite simple pieces of equipment, actually. They look terrifying, but if you can make this thing fly, it's like an actor. So when you get what they call off book, so if you get the words locked into your head as an actor, you've got all of the dialogue, then you can start to play with the character. It's like driving a desk. If you know how this thing works and you don't even have to think about it, then you can really start to focus on your act, what you do. So, you see brilliant broadcasters, people like Greg James and Scott Mills and people like that. They don't have to even think about what they're doing because, and I know Scott, I spoke to Scott recently and we were talking about the fact that he's back in 82 Mills, he's doing his Radio 2 show from his old Radio 1 studio. And I was like, how's that? He went, it's quite nice because I know that studio inside out. Yeah. I know what it does because I spent so long in that studio on Radio 1. And then I think that's, in some respects, it's like a car that you know how to drive and you really know how to push its limits. So yeah, get to know these pieces of equipment, ask the engineers or people that know more than you about it, ask them what it does. Find the person if you're at whichever student radio station you listen to this or whatever, or if you're at Shock, ask the person that knows the most about this piece of equipment and find out about it. Find out what it does. You've got Studers, haven't you? Studers.
In Media City, we've got the Studers, and then in Shock, we've got Axias.
Yes.
Oh, you got Axias, yeah.
The lovely Axias.
Learn what they do. Learn what they do. Because these are, once you learn that, you can really start to then hone your craft as a presenter. And your levels as well, how your voice sits in the mix when you're speaking over the back of a song and mic technique and all sorts of there's lots of things to learn, but once you start to learn that craft, it makes you shine even more to the bosses that will hire you in the future.
I think we both sort of have learnt from pretty much the start how to drive the desk. Yeah. But there has been a lot of people who've come in and have gone, I don't know what to do. What is this? Please help me. And I enjoy teaching other people about all the techie things. Yeah. But that's probably because I'm a geek.
Yeah.
Well, each one, if you look at it, each strip, each fader, essentially is exactly the same. They all do. They'll just have a different sauce on them. And that's it. And it's learning how to fly it with your hands. It's like anything, using your dexterity. Once you kind of learn to do something, it's like riding a bike, isn't it? Yeah. You fell off the first few times and then, you got your balance. And it's like that with a desk. Once you can kind of press things without looking at them, that's when you've got it then. And we all make mistakes. I still occasionally I've not turned Hits radio off for a while. When was the last time I turned it off? I can't remember. It's been a while. But occasionally I will. I'll do something, and because I'll be doing something else, and my eye won't be in the ball. It must be a good 6 months, maybe a year since I've turned it off. But all the screen goes red in front of you.
Wow.
To say that all of the transmitters have gone off, and I'm like, why has that done that? And because I don't panic, I literally stop and think. I go, right, what's causing that? Why has that done that? So I've never been one to panic, where I've seen other presenters around me, their backsides fall out and they go into panic mode. And that's when you can make even more mistakes, isn't it? Airline pilots never panic. Calm, collected, and go, right, why has that done that? And have a stop and think for a minute. And also, I think it's also a good opportunity to let the transmitter have a rest. I mean, those poor things, them transmitters, they work 24 hours a day, don't they? 7 days a week. They're on all the time.
Especially with those splits.
I know, exactly. They must just want a break. Let's have 10 seconds off. Oh. So yeah, I feel for the transmitter sometimes. Just give it a bit of a break.
Oh, should we talk about your career around Yorkshire, essentially?
Gosh,
You've
yeah.
been to pretty much every Yorkshire station that I can name anyway.
Yeah, I didn't leave. Which, in hindsight now, wonderful friend, always late. I wish I'd left, actually. There was an opportunity years ago. I was on Hallam Drive. So I was on 4 till 7 on Hallam. We had a 49% market reach. Everybody listened. You either listened to Radio 1 or you listened to Hallam. It was just huge. It's before social media. It's before, there was just us and the BBC, and that was it. So it was a very different landscape, completely different landscape. And I got a letter one day from a lady called Yana Ranguni. I think she's in New Zealand now. Jana Ranguni, that's it, Jana Ranguni. And she was working at Radio 210 or 210 FM I think it's in Berkshire, isn't it? 210, Thames Valley, that kind of area. So you're within the M25 area at that point. So you could be heard in London. And she said, I was driving through the area, heard your show, still got the letter, really loved it. If you're ever thinking of a move, give me a shout. And I didn't, because I was happy at Hallam. I was on my hometown radio station. Everything was going great. And part of me thinks, and it was, and 210 then, 210 was a slightly smaller station. But if I'd have gone, I'd have been heard by those in London and at Capital or whatever, or Radio 1 much sooner. So in hindsight, should I have gone? I don't know. It was only a letter, but she clearly said that if you're looking for a move, give me a shout. And I never did. But I just think, what happens if I had? It's a sliding doors moment, isn't it?
Like a butterfly effect type thing.
Yeah. What happens if I had? But I didn't. And I found the letter recently. I've just been digitising loads of old paperwork and stuff. And I thought, what happens if I had done that? But I stayed in Yorkshire, was at Hallam. Then I wanted a breakfast show. There was a guy called Daryl Denham who was doing the breakfast show on Hallam at the time. And I've said this to Daryl. My breakfast shows that I went on to create were all based on his. Not all of them, but the first few were, because his attention to detail. Chris Moyles once wrote in his book, Daryl's the hardest working person in British radio or something. And he's right. And me and Chris have talked about this at length before, because we both started at Radio. We've been best mates since we were bloody 13 years old or something. So Daryl had this really incredible hard work ethos that kind of rubbed off on all of us, really. He'd sleep during the day and work throughout the night on all his show ideas and parody songs that he would write. Really good musically. He writes musicals and all sorts of stuff now. So he'd create a parody song and write it from scratch, create all of the music, the lyrics and everything, then go into the radio station or record it at home, go into the radio station, being up all night and do the breakfast show, 6 till 10, and then go home and sleep the entire day and do that again. He was like the hardest working person. And the show was topical, brilliant, won loads of awards. So that work ethos, I thought, that's amazing. I never did the staying up all night thing, but, working really hard. So I got a breakfast show at Viking FM in East Yorkshire. And then we won a Sony Radio Award for that. We didn't get a gold. I think we got a silver or a bronze or something. But it got me noticed. So, and then from that, I went to what is now Capital Yorkshire, but we were called Galaxy. And that was the biggest commercial radio station breakfast show outside London. And I got that. So there was really no need to move because I was living at home in Yorkshire, but on the biggest station outside London. So I wish I had moved. I did live in London for a few years, but that was later. But I wish I'd moved in some respects because it would have given me a different outlook maybe, or I don't know. But I was very lucky to be in because Yorkshire is the biggest county in the country. So it's huge. And that show was very dominant in the marketplace. I think at its peak, we got when I left, I think it was 1.3, 1.4 million listeners. It was just huge. It was a behemoth of a radio station.
I do wish that we were old enough to see what Galaxy was, because we hear about it all the time, and obviously I'm aware of Galaxy and so is Josh.
Yeah.
But we were aware of it when it sort of changed to Capital and that era.
Yeah, Kira, it was because it was primarily a youth radio station. So we didn't talk to kids, so we could push it a little further with the then Radio Authority or Ofcom. So you could be a little more risque. And I think in the noughties, the pendulum swung so far that people were doing stuff that was, you know, you look back now, was quite controversial. I didn't do anything like that, but some people were doing some real stuff. So, you know, we call people woke and all sorts of stuff like that. I think we've swung too far back the other way. We need to be somewhere in the middle where people don't get offended about every single thing.
Like a nice balance.
Yeah, there needs to be a nice balance. But I think in coming out of the lad culture of the 1990s into the noughties, it swung so far, the fact that everything seemed acceptable, and it most certainly wasn't. And, you know, we've got to evolve. We've got to change. We've got to, you know, we've got to learn what's acceptable and not acceptable and think of others. So for good reason, we needed to swing it back so people weren't getting offended and having to suffer in silence and not be allowed to say how they felt. So, but I think people get offended at anything today, don't they, to be honest? So yeah, swing it back. So, because I don't think radio pushes boundaries as much as it used to do. We need to still be able to push some boundaries. Not shock and upset people, but just push things a little bit. So in the noughties, Galaxy was kind of famous for pushing boundaries. And we did a competition called Bank It or Burn It. So you could either bank $5,000, but if you lost, you had to burn it.
Oh.
So we burnt $5,000. Jojo, who I co-hosted the show with, a guy called Danny as well, me, Danny and Jojo. Jojo, with the listener, there's photos of her feeding £5,000 into a pizza oven in a pizza area in Leeds.
I think the fact that it's a pizza oven, I don't know if that makes it better or worse.
It does make it better, doesn't it? And then we did, all week, we were giving away Justin Timberlake tickets. I think he was playing an arena nearby or something. And I needed to come up with an idea of, right, we need to do something every single day. So we had busting for Justin. So the person that pissed the longest won the tickets. So clearly people were getting jugs of water and pouring it down the toilet and making it sound like, but someone weed the longest. Oh God, what was it? Firework or dildo?
I've heard about this vaguely.
Yeah, firework or dildo.
I've heard
that
of
one.
this.
I'm just astounded at the creativity of some of these feature
Oh
names.
yeah, but yeah, this is like the noughties, and I'm not proud of stuff like that. It's not something, you know. But we did a lie detector test, and we all know from the Jeremy Kyle show how bad that can turn out. So that's dangerous territory. But we were just any ideas, and that's we were told just create, and that's what we did. So as I said earlier, the pendulum swung so far that anything was deemed almost acceptable because it was like the Wild West out there. You had to get audience, and you had to remain number one. If you were number one, you had to stay at number one. So you had to constantly keep doing stuff. But yeah, what a time to be on the radio, though. Would I do some of it now? No, not at all. But we did. It was the culture at the time.
I genuinely love Daily Dose. It's one of my favourite shows ever.
Have you never heard it live? I'm guessing you've just heard recordings.
I've heard recordings, yes, because
Right.
you finished when I was 9. So
Oh God,
You're going to make her feel old.
I feel old. I'm only 24.
You don't look a day over 23.
Just got a good surgeon.
yeah, honestly, I've heard recordings, and it's. I talk about it all the time. I talk about it to my other half. I talk about it to Josh. I just think it was incredible, and I think the listening figures reflected that really.
Yeah, we tried to evolve the show. I would drop things that were really popular at their peak because I didn't want them to burn out. So I'd do things in seasons. We had a feature called He Said, She Said, which was essentially based moral dilemma. Someone messages in with a dilemma they've got in their lives, personal thing, and Danny and Jojo would share their opinions. And essentially for those two, it was writing stand-up comedy every day. But it was so popular, and it's what we call the benchmark feature. something that you're famous for, a benchmark feature that people tune in for at a particular time every single day. So we did He Said, She Said at 10 past or 8:15 or something. So it was, you knew when you were in the car and you were passing a certain roundabout that He Said, She Said was on, and you were on time for work or whatever. So, but He Said, She Said was so popular. I used to kill it every so often because I didn't want it to wear out. You know, we'd do it in seasons. We'd bring it back for 2 or 3 months and then kill it for 6. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that gave us the arena to kind of create some new stuff. So I was always very conscious about, I need to keep evolving this thing. I didn't want it to become dated. Should it have ended when it did? Probably. I'm glad that I think it's remembered fondly purely because it ended at its peak.
Yeah.
So, you know, people didn't roll their eyes going, oh, they're doing the same stuff, or they're doing this, or they're doing that, or whatever. It ended at its peak, and I'm quite glad it did. So would I do it again? No, because I think it's done. I think we live in a different world, and I think I want to create new things. Me, Danny and Jojo, we all still get on. Maybe we'd get in a studio one day and talk about it or something. People have said, oh, I'll do a podcast. But, do you know, you would be trying to recreate past glories, and I've never been one about past glories or recreating something, because it's never the same again. If an opportunity came up to do something that was groundbreaking and new with us three, well, yeah, maybe we could do something in the future. Who knows? I never say never, but doing that show again, revisiting those old features, trying to I just think it was of its time. And some of the features are dated. You know, you just need to evolve, don't you, and create new things. I'm all about evolution and creating new stuff. But yeah, I do get asked, will you three get back on the radio? No, it was of its time. There's bits out there available. I think all the podcasts are available somewhere.
They are.
Are they?
Yes.
Someone's hosted them. They're an interesting listen.
But yeah, I think, like you said, it's nice that it ended on a high as opposed to just like fizzling out at the end.
Yeah, I didn't want it to fizzle out. In some respects, I think I got itchy feet in about, so when was the show on? 03 to 14, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I got a bit itchy around 07, 8.
Wow.
But ended up thinking, well, there was nothing else out there and there was a couple of offers and a couple of little bits I spoke about. But Global at the time was a brand new company. That was exciting at the time. I thought, do you know what, actually, I'm going to stay around here because new things were happening. And then we rebranded as Capital. And so that gave us but I do feel very fortunate and very lucky that I was a Galaxy DJ. I feel very, very, very fortunate about that because there was something special about that brand. And you probably heard interviews. If you're a radio nerd and you've listened to radio stuff, you've heard whether it's Crunch and Roll. That's a brilliant podcast you should check out. Made by my friend John and Simon. They're both brilliant. But yeah, everyone who's a Galaxy DJ who's been on that have just talked about how amazing it was to be a Galaxy DJ. Whether you were at Galaxy Yorkshire, Galaxy Manchester 102, Stephen L and Karen up at the Northeast, 105, 106, whether you're at Galaxy 101 in Bristol or in the Midlands, there was, or Galaxy Scotland that wasn't on for too long. It was an amazing brand to be part of. It really was. And
JoJo's technically still at the same station because she's
still
with
there.
Capital.
How? We FaceTimed a couple of weeks ago, and we were on FaceTime for like 2.5 hours. It was randomly like one Friday night or something, and I'd got in and she was messaging me. I messaged her, and I think she just ended up FaceTiming me. And yeah, 2.5 hours we were still gassing, having a good catch up, bless her. And she was like, I'm still here. I'm still there. I said, I know you are. I hear you, occasionally. But she's been in that building at Joseph Well in Leeds. She's been there since February the 14th, 1997.
Wow.
Valentine's Day, 1997. She's still there and she's still smashing it because she's brilliant. She's a phenomenal broadcaster and a classically trained actress as well. She trained at Lambda. She's an incredible actress. She's a smart cookie, Jojo.
I did not know that.
Me neither.
Yep. She's a classically trained actress. And she's done all sorts of stuff, actually, her acting CV. She's always kind of juggled. She didn't act for a few years, but she's kind of juggled both of them a little bit. And I know she had some time off Capital just to do a production a couple of years ago. Yeah, she's phenomenal.
Shall we talk about your time with the chart? Because we've been very Yorkshire focused. I feel like we should move towards
Let's go national.
National.
Oh gosh, yeah. So as a child, I loved listening to the charts on a Sunday. Yeah, Sunday afternoon, 4:00 is when the charts, or 5:00 when I was really young. It used to start, and then I was at Galaxy, and a lovely guy called Pete Simmons said to me, because the Hit 40 UK, which is now the Big Top 40, or well, actually it's much smaller. I don't think Big Top 40 is on as many stations. Anyway, it all kind of got divided up with ownership and all sorts of stuff like that. And we've got the Hits UK chart. I think it was all at one point. It was across everything. Then the big bosses of each of the radio groups were essentially on the committee for the chart show. And Foxy was doing it at the time, and they'd had pop stars covering the show, and it wasn't quite cutting the mustard. Although the pop stars were great, they just weren't chart DJs. So, it became more about them hosting the show than the actual chart. And it's always about, the chart is about, not about you, it's about the music. It's like when you're a presenter on the radio, if you're hosting a breakfast show or whatever show, it's not about you, it's about the listener. The listener comes first. Or the contributor, the guest. It's not you, you're the facilitator. Yeah, you can, it's your show and you add things and your name's above the door or whatever, but remember the listener always comes first. And always remember to listen. If you're interviewing a guest, listen. Always listen to what they're saying. So, the chart came first, and it was becoming more about the pop star when they covered Foxy. So they wanted a physical, actual DJ to do it when Foxy was off. And they tried, a few of them did them, and a friend of mine, Elliot, piloted for it, and we'd worked together at the Pulse in West Yorkshire, and I'd piloted and Elliot had piloted. And I remember cleaning the car one day and Elliot was doing the show. Elliot was doing the chart. I thought, oh, brilliant, good on Elliot. That was it. Because I was doing breakfast shows at this point, so I was focused on breakfast. The chart would have been nice to do, just to cover it, just to dep it. But, I heard Elliot. I was like, oh, brilliant, because I love Elliot Webb to bits. He does breakfast on BBC Hereford and Worcester. He's fantastic. I love the guy. And then a few months later, I got a call because I'd piloted and I didn't press my own buttons. I didn't drive my own desk when I did the pilot for it. So it was all right. And a guy called Mick Meadows rang up and they went, I've heard your pilot. It's not very good. Well, it is good, but you're not pressing the buttons, are you? I said, no. So he said, come down to Capital and do a pilot. So I did. I remember Foxy buzzing me through, saying something like, hey, a proper DJ. I was like, oh, bless you. He's always really supportive of me. And then did the pilot. And then I got a call a couple of weeks later going, are you free on this day? I was like, yes. So I got to cover for Foxy and then became his permanent dep. I became the one that covered him. And then Foxy left. And then I got the chart show and they wanted a double header. They wanted to pair me with someone else. So I did a pilot with Katie Hill, who weirdly I spoke to this morning, actually. We were messaging each other this morning. And she used to be on Blue Peter back in the day and stuff. And we just hit it off. We got in the studio and just connected. And we're still really good friends. So they offered it to us both. And that was it. And Katie did it for about a year, I think. And then I don't know what the reason. I still to this day I don't know the reasons why, but she came off the chart, and then I continued on my own for about another 2 years or something. And then there was political radio industry reasons why I came off it due to ownership, and the Galaxy show was very dominant in Yorkshire. It was number one, but the ownership was changing, or I think the stations in Yorkshire were going to start to take Hit 40 UK, and they'd not taken it, and they didn't want me on on those radio stations because that would be having your competition on your radio station. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they didn't want that. So I was given a choice. It's either the chart or Galaxy. So I went, well, it's Galaxy, isn't it? Of course it's Galaxy. The chart is amazing and it's brilliant, but it's just 40 songs. Yes, it's great profile, but the Galaxy show was creativity, and I've always been about creativity. So I stuck with Galaxy and threw my heart and soul back into that show again. because it was a bit of a, I was in London, I'd be doing the show in Yorkshire, but then I'd have to go and interview a pop star. I won't name the pop star. I remember one particular pop star. I'm not going to name them. But I'd done the breakfast show in Yorkshire, so I'd been up since 5 a.m, gone in, done the show, got a train to London, got into a Soho recording studio, got there, and the pop star came in and went, chop, chop, I've got a facial in 20 minutes.
Oh.
And I was like, you what? Chop, chop, I've got a facial in 20 minutes. So, yeah, that's what you did. But the majority of them were absolutely lovely. And I was the first person to, because now we download music. I was the first person to announce Niles Barkley and Crazy as number one, which was the first song to go to number one on downloads alone. So with no physical media sold at all. So yeah, there was some nice moments. The 1000th number one did that, which was an Elvis record, weirdly, because they re-released all of Elvis's music. So each week I had a different Elvis song in the chart for weeks, which is interesting. So no, it was brilliant, and I just count my lucky stars that I got to do it. Because I was the one, when I was a technical operator at Radio Air, I was the one that was I was monitoring the show in Leeds when I was a 15-year-old, when it was coming up the satellite line, the network charter. A brilliant broadcaster who I think lives with Parkinson's now, but a guy called David Jensen, who's a phenomenal DJ, brilliant broadcaster, was on Radio 1 back in the day, and a mainstay at Capital for many, many, many years, and he did the network chart, David Kid Jensen. And yeah, so I couldn't quite believe that it went Jensen, Fox, and then me and Katie, and then me. I couldn't quite wrap my head around that, because I'm a radio nerd. And I still can't wrap my head around it. I still can't. I still find it bizarre that I got to do it. I'm like, what?
Well, I was going to ask you about the satellite thing, because obviously Hit 40 UK, national show. But what is this about you playing certain jingles over a satellite line for Anorex?
So when I was a technical operator at Radio Air, I would listen down the line. So the satellite would connect about 3:15. And there was a DJ on Radio Air at the time. So I would be in Studio 3, the production studio, listening down the line to Capital. So you've got to remember, in a pre-internet world, how do I hear Capital 95.8 FM in London? How do I listen to Capital FM? I can't. I had an aunt who lived in London, and occasionally we'd go down and I'd take a cassette recorder down and I'd record some Capital. But that was it. I couldn't hear Capital. And every time I did hear it, it sounded massive. Big American voiceovers, a guy called BJ, huge, massive voice. It just sounded huge compared to everything else. So I'd listen down the line for 15 minutes to Capital, and then it would fade away as I went into the ad break, and then the line was silent. And then at 4:02 precisely or something, the show would start. And then afterwards, they would sometimes leave the satellite connected, and Dr. Fox would continue, or even when Jensen was doing it, Foxy was on afterwards at 7 o'clock and do Fox's Jukebox. So you get 10, 15 minutes of that before they disconnected the satellite. And that's all I had each week. And it wasn't my full-time job they call tech up the chart. A guy called Steve McGuire used to do it. But I used to, when he couldn't do it, I used to dep for him as a tech op. So it was only occasionally I got to do this. So when I end up in London all those years later and I'm chart DJ, I just thought, surely there's loads of other radio nerds who are listening down the line to Capital like I was. I mean, the internet existed at this point, but getting to listen down the line, see if anything happens, see if they hear anything that, wouldn't usually end up on the air. And I just used to play Capital jingles down the line for a few minutes. And I've had several people come up to me during the subsequent years going, I've got tapes of you playing Hit 40 Capital and Hit 40 UK jingles before the chart starts. I went, good. And I'm like, brilliant. That's great. Fantastic. Because that's the reason I did it. Because we're all nerds. But I also think as well, it's healthy not to be a nerd publicly, because I think if you're too much of an anorak, it can put the industry off a little bit. So you've got to remain professional. So you can be nerdy, but secretly nerdy. I mean, I'm past it now. I'm not just starting out, but if you're starting out and you're a bit too nerdy, it can put people off. the industry can sometimes be, oh, bloody anoraks. And it can be, and that's what they did to me. When I was coming through the ranks at Radio Air, I was called an anorak. And it was Mike Toolan. Mike Toolan, God love Mike. I love Mike so much.
Lovely man.
And he said to me, you're bouncing off the walls. He was at uni at the time, and he was just starting out. But he had a conversation with me in Studio 3 at Radio Air going, you need to calm down and stop being as much of an anorak. And I started to, I don't know, become a bit more mature. I was just bouncing off the walls as a 16, 17-year-old. And it wasn't cool. It wasn't cool. But you have to grow up, don't you? We all have to grow up.
Unfortunately, we do.
Yeah. I know. I'm still a child inside, though. I'm
child
still a
heart.
kid. Yeah, oh God, yeah. And I think it's good as an adult to sometimes, we've all got our inner child. Our inner child is all inside us. So I think it's good to sometimes be a bit of a nerd. I'm a professional nerd these days.
Professional nerd, I think that's a nice way to describe it.
Yeah, nerd.
So
but Greg is James. He's open about being a nerd, isn't he, as well? So I think nerd is quite cool.
I've met Greg James once, and for 10 minutes we literally talked about being radio anoraks.
Was this the same?
I love that.
Yes,
I love
this
that
was
about
the
him.
same thing.
Yeah, it was
the nicest man in the world, Greg James. Love you, Greg. I love him. I think he's awesome and a phenomenal broadcaster.
On the topic of BBC presenters, shall we move to your time at the BBC?
The BBC, gosh, yeah. So I'd ended up. I left Capital, did some personal stuff, then I had to get back onto radio, and then ended up at the BBC. And I never thought I'd work for the BBC. I always kind of wanted to work for the BBC. I guess the BBC I used to hear when I was younger, apart from Radio 1, all seemed a little bit stuffy and a bit boring and a bit serious. But I'm so glad I got to work there because I learned, because I was a commercial radio DJ for years. But my time at the BBC, especially when I got a daily show and I'm interviewing people or I'm interviewing politicians and pushing politicians on serious points, because I've always had an interest in politics or news or stuff like that. I've always had an interest in current affairs, or because my dad always used to say to me as a child, watch the news. You need to be aware of what's going on in the world. So I've always kind of had an interest, although at the moment I don't read the news because it's just, the world is a crazy place, isn't it? So I've disabled all the news apps and I don't read any news at the minute because it's too much for our brains to take in. So at the BBC, I loved the fact, and I had two amazing producers, Sarah and Katie, both my producers at the BBC, and they were just phenomenal and essentially taught me how to do good speech radio. And, when you're interviewing someone who is stage 4 in their cancer journey and it's terminal and, things are not looking that good and they're towards end of life treatment, and you're sitting in front of them and in a matter of weeks that they're not going to be here anymore, and they're chatting to you about something that they're doing to raise money for cancer research or whatever that may be, but that's a different style of broadcasting. Or you're chatting to someone who is, like a politician or a counsellor or something like that, or you're chatting to an author of a new book about something they've gone through which is life-changing, or they're living with a life-changing condition or injuries or something like that. That's a different skill set. And I remember going to, my friend was interviewing the late Michael Parkinson, who is from my hometown of Barnsley, and he would occasionally come back and open a new ward or something at the hospital. And my friend was interviewing him, and it was her very first interview. She'd never interviewed anyone, but she was doing a media course at Barnsley College. Anyway, I went along for some moral support and ended up being in the room with her, holding the microphone when she's interviewing Parky. And she said that this is my first interview, and he was really impressed. She did an amazing job considering it was her first interview. And she said, have you got any advice for me? And he said, and I alluded to this earlier, listen. Always listen. If you're interviewing someone, listen. And also the questions, if you've got some questions written down in front of you, the next question you have written down is not necessarily the question you will answer. Always be prepared to go off your questions list, because that could lead you somewhere else, somewhere award-winning, somewhere that could be really powerful. You could get something out of that person that you didn't expect to be able to get out of them. So, be inquisitive. Always ask questions that if you're inquisitive by nature, ask questions. Ask questions that you think the audience would be interested in as well. So there's all of this advice. And I was like, and that always stuck in my head. So I had great production around me. And I think that I learned a great deal from being in the BBC. And maybe one day I'll end up back at the BBC doing something. Who knows? I seem to be in this game for the rest of my living days at some point. So who knows? But I learned a great deal about being at the BBC, about speech radio and interviewing. I've always enjoyed interviewing. I've always enjoyed talking to people. Can't shut me up sometimes. But I also love music radio. I love being a jock. I love that kind of thing. But having both skill set is really... I remember Daryl Morris, who's at Times Radio now, isn't he? I think Daryl.
Yes.
He was a music radio jock at Bauer a few years ago. And I remember chatting to him. I said, and he'd done some speech stuff. I said, speech is your future. I mean, obviously you knew that, but I remember saying to him, do speech radio. You are just incredible. I think he'd done some cover shifts somewhere, maybe at Talk Radio or something. And I heard him and was just blown away. What an incredible broadcaster. So yeah, I love speech radio. I love it. So yeah, I really enjoyed the BBC. I really enjoyed it. But there was a call in to come back to music radio and an opportunity I couldn't turn down. So I ended up at Hirst Radio.
You've segued very nice towards hits, because that's where we're going next. Belters is an interesting one. Belters and throwbacks.
Yeah, so Belters dates back to the DOS. So in the audience survey, at 9 o'clock, traditionally on a breakfast show, your audience will drop because people have gone into work. So what you want is an extra few ticks in the Radar diaries. So Radar is how audience listening is measured currently. With online, we can see data as it's happening, see people switching off, tuning in, all sorts of stuff. But we still do measure here in 2024 audiences by ticks in diaries. So you may get a knock on the door going, hello, do you listen to the radio? Yeah. Could you tick this diary? You might win a holiday. How long do I ticket for? Oh, just a few weeks. Oh, come back in a few weeks. Great. Might win a holiday. Great. Barbados. Lovely. So you tick this diary, and each tick, I think, is worth 1,000 listeners. So they target particular postcode areas or whatever. But they assume that another 1,000 people will probably do the same. So you want a few more ticks in the diary. So we used to do the world's worst radio feature at 5 to 9, which was called The Mind Masher, which is essentially a brain teaser. It's rubbish. But we'd give you the answer at 9:05, and if you got it right, we'd play you the belter. And the belter was a big 90s dance tune. So that is where the belter came from. So each day at 9:05, we'd play you a big belting dance tune like Gala or Free From Desire or, Dream or Live in Joy or K-Class or something like that. So, and they weren't that old, those records at that time. They weren't that old, maybe a decade old. But yeah, so that's where that came from. And then all those years later, Facebook, I'd always called a dance tune, a big dance tune, I always called it a belter. Oh, it's a belting tune, innit? So when Facebook Live first arrived, they allowed us to do, because there was something called Periscope that you could do live video with, but...
Twitter, wasn't it?
Yeah, Twitter, yeah, Periscope.
Yeah.
So me and Moyle started playing with Periscope a little bit a few years ago, doing some live videos. And then Facebook Live arrived. Zuckerberg and his team of gurus allowed you to do live streaming on YouTube. And the algorithm was open. So as many followers as you had, you could probably get that many people watching. And I think I got like 250,000 people or something on Facebook or something. So I did this DJ set in my kitchen in about 2018 or something. This is long before lockdown. And like 20,000 people were watching me in my kitchen. I'm like, oh, this is all right, isn't it? And my friend Steve White said, you should do that again. I was like, really? He went, yeah, just do it weekly. I was like, oh, I could do it actually at the same time every single week. So it's like an appointment, like a benchmark, an appointment to view. So I was like, all right, okay, I'll do it. So what can I call it? Oh, kitchen belters. So I'll DJ in my kitchen. So, and because I can't do anything by halves, so the radio sounds like the radio because of a multiband graphic equalizer, which is a radio station on-air processor. And you can get them made by Auburn. They make the Optimod. There's loads of different versions of them. But I had one of the old Galaxy ones from back in the day. So I wired that in so it sounded massive. It sounded like Galaxy through your phone. And got proper studio lights in my kitchen, got my DJ controller, dressed it so it looked great, and started DJing. And I was getting 50,000 people watching every single week on Facebook Live at 6:00, Kitchen Belters. Then lockdown happened, and then it just spiraled out of control. It was like 100,000 people watching this thing. And then Facebook, there was the whole you can't play music on Facebook thing. So I tried to get around that by physically changing the key of each song and speeding the songs up a little bit, but they started to sound weird, and then the algorithm worked out so it was kind of, you were getting kicked off all the time. So I thought, well, I stuck it on a kind of, it was cheap as chips, but you paid £1 or something or whatever it was to watch it. So you monetized it a little bit, but it wasn't about the money. It just paid for the streaming essentially. And I wasn't making £100,000 from that, I'll tell you that. I wasn't. But yeah, so that, it kind of built some momentum. And I was at the BBC, and in fact, this was just before lockdown, was it? It was around lockdown. Hits Radio Pride, Bauer were launching Hits Radio Pride as a pop-up station. And one of my close friends, Tetley, who was to do with that, said, you should do belters on it. And then I spoke to Paul, and who's at Hits and everything, and they said, yeah, it'd be brilliant if you could do that. That'd be amazing. So I did it on Hits Radio Pride, and then there was such a success of that. The streaming on that went through the roof. They said, will you come and do it on Hits Network? So we did I think we did a Easter Belters or something to start with, and that went down well. And then they said, yeah, could you do it every Saturday night? I was like, yes, I can. So left the BBC, went to Bauer, and then Paul was like, well, we'd love you on a Sunday as well. Could you do Sunday evenings? I was like, yeah, that works perfectly because I've got a brand called Believe Achieve. So as a public speaker, I travel, and I'm always in a boardroom or some conference or business somewhere doing Believe Achieve once or twice a week or something. So that kind of works for me, not being on daily. I mean, if something comes along that's daily one day, and it's really exciting, and I get to create, and we get to push boundaries a little bit, I'd maybe think about that. Who knows where I may end up on 5 days a week again. Who knows? But I really like what I've got at the moment because it's a nice little balance of public speaking, which is still like being on the radio. You're in front of a live audience, and you're getting to motivate people and show people that anything is possible. If you believe it, you can achieve it. Because it's manifestation, it's the power of the mind, and then do the radio on the weekend. So I've got a great balance, and I'm very, very, very lucky that I get to do this. I'm very blessed because it's amazing, and the show's national. So yeah, so it's lovely, it's amazing. So I'm very, 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 very blessed.
I love belters, by the way.
No, bless you.
It is my favourite hit show. If I had to rank hit shows, honestly, me and my other half put it on all the time.
Well, so it's just a load of big 90s noughties.
It's just fun
and tens dance tunes, and it's less about me and it's more about the music. Like the throwbacks. What I'm enjoying is being a jock again. I really enjoy being a music jock. Would I do that 5 days a week? No, I'd probably get burnt out if I was music jockeying 5 days a week. Me and Joel, who does radio, does Hits Liverpool, nearly said Radio City then, does Hits Radio Liverpool breakfast show. We call them wobblehead DJs. And I think he coined the phrase wobble-head DJ. Wobble-head DJ. So I couldn't do it 5 days a week, but 2 days on a weekend is ace. I love it. Just banging out the hits and being really hot. And, doing the throwback and jumping in and, doing those hot segs and everything. I love it. I get a real buzz from doing that. And then I get to do the breakfast show. So I'm back on Hits Radio Breakfast on Monday, I think. Yeah, Monday. So flares off. So yes, I'm getting to dip. So which is nice to do it for 2 weeks in the summer. So it's nice getting to drop into the breakfast show and do lots of great content again and working with the team there. So yeah, very lucky.
Someone who you're good friends with who also does a breakfast show is Moyles, who you keep mentioning.
Yes.
Moyles is the reason why I'm into radio.
Really?
Yeah. I think it must have been 2013. I came across a video. He did a 60-hour marathon. Comic relief. Yeah. And I watched that video and I went, yeah, I want to be in radio now. And that was it. What is your relationship like with Moyles?
We've been friends since we were like 13, 14, something like that. He's like a year and a bit older than me. So, but yeah, we always there was a guy who we recently lost called Carl Kingston. And it was his funeral last week, actually. And Carl mentored me and Chris, and Carl was a big radio lover. I mean, I think me and Chris or other people are nerds. Carl was like the ultimate nerd, and he'd studied radio all his life, and he'd collect radio recordings from all around the world and subscribe to this thing called California Air Checks, where this guy called Art Volo would just turn up at a radio station with a video camera and video the DJ. I urge you to search on YouTube. Let me just do this here for Jojo Kincaid. Jojo Kincaid. Kincaid is Kincaid. Oh, is it Jojo Kincaid? Yeah, Jojo Kincaid. And it's amazing. It's in fact, do you know what? I'm going to try and, can I play you some here actually? Let me just try and find the right little clip here, because he plays, here he is. Okay. So, but you can physically watch this. He's on KKLQ Q106 in San Diego, Jojo Kincaid cooking, 1987, right? And do you know the song Word Up by Cameo?
Yes.
Yeah.
He comes out of an ad break. So the ad is on and he starts going, yep, towards the end of the ad. He's kind of mimicking the ad and then fires into the song at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And I remember me and Chris watching this in Carl's study, in the back of his house where all his records were, whilst drinking copious amounts of Earl Grey tea, because Carl loved Earl Grey tea. And we were watching this stuff as like 14, 15, 16-year-olds. And it's had 314,000 views on YouTube. So yeah, it's not had 1 million views, but it's had a lot. In fact, someone's commented going, most people will never know what kind of skill is required to produce this kind of on-air performance. Here we go on.
Approval. Yeah. Dealer participation may affect final price.
Yeah. Okay, this is it. The beginning of your party music marathon with money in the music. Friday, my attitude is showing. Jojo Cooking here on Q16. Write the song down. Word Up. This will get you $106 if you count to win on the Q.
Wow.
I had a smack at the end. But in there, in the vocal, okay, in Word Up, there's a O. And the station is Q106. So he left a gap for them to fill in the O. So here it comes.
Music marathon with money.
Listen, here it comes.
Music.
You hear there where he kind of, so he talks along with the beat. So music with the, what's he say? Music with the...
With money in the music.
Money in the music, because he's hitting the beat. Those are called posts in the song. He's hitting the posts. And I think he leaves a little.
Friday, my attitude is showing. Jojo Cooking here on Q16.
You hear him leave the gap.
Oh.
That is
And this is the stuff that you study, and you watch his hands on the desk. So that style of broadcasting, It's slightly different to what we've got today, but you can take bits of that. You can talk to the beat of the track a little bit. You can do hot segs like they did. So we would go around cars and watch these videos. And his then wife Sue would make us, a bit of tea. And I remember I was working at the radio station in Bradford called The Pulse, and a guy called Steve Martin, not the actor. Steve Martin would he'd do this thing called Jock Fest every so often, where he'd literally get a load of cover DJs on the radio station and stick them on and take us all off to a conference room and just play us videos of and get a consultant to come in, a really good consultant, and play us videos like this. So I'd be on the air in the evening trying to be like bloody Jojo Kincaid cooking, going at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And I remember Steve giving me a piece of advice, which was the best piece of advice anyone's ever given me, is if sometimes you feel like you're talking too fast on the radio or people say to you, slow down a little bit, your pace is going, you're going too fast, you're tripping over your words, get a piece of A4 paper, fold it in half, and just write the words slow down on it and put it in front of you. And you'll see it.
Oh, that's quite useful.
You'll see it. It's there in front of you.
I'll have to try that one time.
We need to try that.
Yeah, especially with my news reading, I'm quite pacey, which is...
Yeah, just put the words, write it down, A4 piece of paper, and just stick it in front of you. Because out the corner of your eye, you'll see it. And that'll tell your brain to slow down. Best bit of advice anyone's ever given me.
Well, on the topic of advice, final question for today. If you could go back to yourself, I mean, you're 24, so let's just say 20 years ago.
Yeah, 20 years ago, I was 4 years old.
If you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Oh, gosh, that's a really good question. One piece of advice. It would be maybe stop being as hyperactive. When I was younger, I don't think there's anything I'd want to change. Piece of advice would be probably just calm down a little bit. I mean, they took me off numbers in drinks, fizzy drinks, when I was little, because I got a bit bitey apparently.
Oh,
my mum said I got bitey, so yeah, I was a bit hyperactive. So don't be as annoying. I wasn't too annoying. My heart was always in the right place, but I was always chomping at the bit, wanting more, and it will come. So I think it's, less is always more. I think that's the thing. Less is more. And that's something that I've learned. That's one of my little mottos in life. It'll come. Less is more. Just work hard. Never overstay your welcome.
And I think that is a beautiful note to end on.
I suppose it is, isn't it?
Yeah. This has been quite surreal, to be honest.
I've really enjoyed this.
This is one of the best days of my life.
Oh, shut up.
It is, honestly. I cannot believe
I'm really
this.
touched.
This is, we didn't expect you to say yes this at all, and this has been amazing. I'm never going to forget this.
Well, hopefully we'll get to work together one day in this crazy radio industry, because I'm not planning on going anywhere unless the radio industry goes, no, we're not going to give you any more work. That's it. But I think the world is changing. Technology is changing. We're all content creators these days, whether you're creating content for radio, which is going nowhere, or you're creating content for YouTube or TikTok or whatever the next social media giant will be. We're all content creators, aren't we? So I'm sure our paths will get to cross at some point. And once you guys have left uni and you're onto your own careers, just kick the door open for the next generation. Just kick it wide open for them, because they need you as to kick the door open for them as well. And if the chain can follow on, well, that's surely a good thing, isn't it?
Definitely. Well, hopefully, as long as the radio industry is around, there will always be a place for you, Steph Hirst.
Oh, bless you. Just give me a job in the future when you're running it.
Of course.
Promise,
we'll give
that.
you that.
Overnight. Yeah, overnight will be fine. I'm not bothered.
For the
I'm not bothered. Yeah, just, big hello to all you truckers out there. Did that earlier, didn't I? Bless you. It's been, honestly, thank you so much, Josh. Thank you so much, Kara. You've been amazing to chat to, and I wish you the greatest success at Shock and your future careers. You're both going to be stars.
Oh, thank you so much.
Stephanie Hirst, thank you very much.
Pleasure.